Hello, everybody, and welcome to CONSERVATISH episode 169. My name is Peter Edgar Feliciano. Make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening. Make sure you leave a review, rate it, and share it with your less offendable friends. You can find me on Instagram at Peter_Feliciano for now, although I may switch that up soon. And you can find me on TikTok at CONSERVATISH Podcast. You can find me on Parler for all you white supremacists. And yeah, our guest today, the wonderful Aaron, is back. Yay!
Hello, hello.
Where can people find you again? Please plug you.
Yeah, absolutely. I am the host of a cultural and political podcast that we call Hit Factory that gives a sociopolitical view of all of the films of the 1990s specifically. So we are online at Hit Factory Pod. We've got a Patreon, patreon.com/hitfactorypod, and we're on Apple and Spotify streaming services if you want to take a gander there as well. Yeah, that's us. And I should plug really quickly that we have been donating our Patreon proceeds month to month, and for the month of November we are giving to an organization called Labor Notes. They're a publication and organizing community by and for rank and file union members and labor activists that helps them to coordinate, activate, and to organize to strengthen workers' protections, really in every industry and sector. They're a great organization, and we're happy to give to them.
Fantastic. Well, welcome back, sir. I also just want to start off the program by saying Kenny Loggins had some fucking sweet bass lines, man. He was a nasty boy when it came to the bass. Him and Michael McDonald, as much shit as he got in 40-Year-Old Virgin, that motherfucker could write a goddamn bass line. I'm telling you, man.
He's a good one. Absolutely.
Yeah, you're a what did you call it? A cultural commentator or whatever. I figured you would appreciate that.
I do indeed.
But you're only like 21, so it doesn't really matter. You're not plugged into Kenny Loggins like us old people are.
I'm the ripe age of 30, my friend.
Are you really?
I am indeed. Just turned 30 this year, but yeah, still a young gun. Excited to be in the pantheon of repeat guests on CONSERVATISH.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's the most recent ones I think were Mark Hughes came back for his second one. But back in the day before I moved, it was the Good Girl was on like three times, I think. My brother Will he's been on probably like 4 or 5 times. I was thinking about having Will back on and doing a non-political show at all, like where we're not allowed to talk about politics or Patrice.
Oh boy.
Every show I talk about Patrice O'Neill.
Yeah, well, you got to bring him up as often as you can, brother.
It's actually, he's coming up on his 9 years anniversary of his death.
Yeah.
In weeks.
R.I.P. to Patrice. Yeah, he was a pretty legendary comedian.
Yeah. So I wanted to have you back on. Obviously, I enjoy our conversations, and that first episode we did was really intriguing and stuff. I don't have too much of a structure for this one, as I rarely ever have any sort of structure, but I'd like to get your thoughts on, let's just jump into election stuff. So you did not vote for Joseph Biden.
No, I did not.
Even though you're a liberal, even though you're a leftist or whatever.
Well,
you said leftist, right?
Let's make the distinction. So I'll do it again.
Well, hey, people maybe listening right now who did not listen to your previous episode.
Absolutely. So it's always important to make this fundamental distinction, and it's good to do this too, I think, for a lot of people who are more conservative, more right-leaning, because I think that the two get conflated. So from here on out, and whenever I use the terminology of the left, what I mean is everything that is truly left of that center. It's everything that is focused primarily on more progressive policies that are about, that dreaded word of socialism or democratic socialism, and something that starts to sort of dismantle and remove some of that hyper-centralized governmental agency, and also kind of break some of those more oppressive strictures of capitalism, as it were. So So liberals themselves, people who vote generally Democratic, people who are like big Biden stans, I would often consider them probably pretty much like right in the center, if not just barely center left on the spectrum of political ideologies. But inherently in the word itself, right? Like liberalism is still operating within a capitalist structure, still operating within free markets, and still operating within a lot of the confines of society as it is already today. So there's not a ton that they're focused on, at least politically and economically. And I think part of what your show does is shows, I think, a lot of the dissonance with liberal ideology, which is activating almost exclusively on a cultural plane, and those things kind of bearing a lot of hypocrisies and holes that are easy to punch. So when I say left, I mean left, and I'll designate myself as a leftist, and some other people that we may bring up as liberal, and the two things are not synonymous in my mind.
Now, you said some of those really intriguing, because from what I've experienced, maybe this is liberals, not leftists, want more government, want a more centralized government, want more federal, less state control. You're saying that you actually want smaller government?
No, so I want more decentralized government. I think that part of what the federal government is there to do is to help to regulate, fund, and facilitate a lot of things at a more local and communal level. So in the idea of socialism itself, a lot of these government programs are the things that simply provide the structure and the funding by which individual societies can thrive, right? But at the local level, I think is where a lot of people on the left are really focused, because it's where most things can get done. Trying to change things from the top down is very rarely as successful as getting some people who have sort of bold policy ideas in at the local level, and even at the state level. So that's where a lot of attention is focused, and so the players may remain the same, but the actual will of the idea of an executive order that says everybody has to behave in XYZ ways, as opposed to decentralizing that idea and killing autocracy, right? Killing authoritarianism, and giving places more power, but of course regulated within the rules and confines of federal legislation. That way we don't have sort of the piecemeal kind of governing that we have presently in the states.
Yeah, as far as the states and the smaller government elections, actually Republicans handed Democrats asses to them.
Yeah,
if you can really, when it comes down to it, a lot of people, if you can verify that, everything, and we can get into that possibly regarding the election, if that's all, if the dust settles and it actually is fair and all that stuff, then actually Republicans and people who are more conservative,
Yeah, absolutely. If we're getting right into the election stuff, I will say to everyone listening, liberal, conservative, leftist, what have you, I think that the real winner of the election was Trumpism. I think that it's shown that it's here to stay, and I think that more than anything else, a lot of my particular policy positions were validated by the absolute ass handing that the Democrats received. And well, and it goes deeper,
So feeling wise, it's from our conversations, as much as you dislike the policies that Trump had, whatever, it seems like you have more anger towards established Democrats.
I think that that's probably a mischaracterization.
Okay.
and here I've had to explain myself to a lot of Democrats before. I think that people who are more the liberal persuasion, right? Those sort of like center left or center sort of folks in terms of their political ideology often accuse the left of going after Democrats more than Republicans. And the reason that I think that is so frequently is that the idea of having the Democrats be an oppositional party to a lot of the more laissez-faire free market ideologies of traditional conservatism, there is no opposition party. You have two parties that legislate often the same way when it comes to those economic fundamentals, right? So when I get characterized,
I'm more talking about you personally. I know that what you're saying seems like I get what you mean, or what I think I get what you mean is people who are Democrats are like, why aren't these people on our side? They hate Trump too. You're either with us or you're against us. Is it that type of? I'm talking about you specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing that I always say is the reason that I go after the Democrats more than the Republicans is because the Democrats are the ones that are supposed to be on my side. These people are the ones who are, who champion themselves as the good guys, who champion themselves in our society as the people who are, they are considered the party of the people in American history. And for a long time, they were the party of the working class until they undercut and deregulated and sold out basically everybody who makes under, six-figure salary in the country. And that still exists to today. So the thing that I point out is, I have nothing to gain from lying in bed with the Republicans and duking it out there. What I can achieve and what the left hopes to achieve is to persuade the Democratic Party to actually start legislating like an oppositional party, like a left-wing party. And I'm sure that this is going to be fodder for the right wing, but yes, we want to push the Democratic Party left. We want them to be more malleable to the demands of the left.
Fiscally, regulatory stuff like that, not necessarily. And let's just again bring it as far as maybe culturally with some of your peers and people on your side on the left, but you specifically would like more Democrats to be more left when it comes to non-cultural things specifically.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing: is how and why do you legislate culture? You know what I mean? Creating parameters and restrictions on what is, the very First Amendment in the Constitution is not a winning message. Regulating and legislating how people think, act, and what they say, especially as it pertains to. Wow, that's a nice loud motorcycle.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're right by a gas station here at my place, so it's always fun. We get all the little mini bikes on the weekends. But here's the thing: is I think that part of the left ideology is about preserving free speech, even when you disagree with it. It's not preserving free speech that is that sounds good to you. A lot of people in leftist circles, even at the sort of more intellectual level or even journalistic level, have codified their ideas about free speech, and have bemoaned the conceit of cancel culture, even when it pertains to what we might consider dangerous ideologies, even when that falls into more fascist, authoritarian, white supremacist ideologies, like those things. The more you try to stamp those things out and say that they don't have a place, the more they're stoked and the more resentment that's built there. And so, having an actual dialogue about those things, I think, is one of the first and best ways to, I think, rescue some people who may be, on their slow descent into those really hateful ideas and rhetoric.
And as far as the hateful ideas and rhetoric, I follow a lot of conservatives. I follow a lot, and liberals too, but a lot. No one has ever been actually hateful when it comes to Blacks, Jews, gays. Like the most, even the guy I had on my show, nice guy, Prudent Patriot, he was on my show a long time ago, maybe a year and a half ago, and he he was one of the only times where someone said something that I disagreed with. He said that he believes homosexuality was more of a choice, and I, disagreed with him. But he didn't. I mean, the guy, as much as wrong as whatever, he actually had gay friends. So like, as far as hate and rhetoric, it gets a little sticky because that goalpost can always change. I will say that one of the things I was thinking about regarding these leftist or liberal-owned companies, what Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey, as an example, you know what they are? They're a friend. They're an annoying friend who has the one bootleg movie that you want to see. And he's like, I'll let you watch it if you come over to my house. And so you're like, fuck, I don't like this guy. So you go over to his house. He's got the only copy. He puts it on, and every 5 seconds he pauses it. The director is like a Kevin Smith fan. The director in this is like the same director. Like, okay, got it. I just want to watch the movie. You know what I mean? And then like, no, it goes on a little bit. Oh, you know what? Actually, he pauses it again. This is it was a little problematic that actor said that, because it doesn't really, he gets so annoying interrupting that you eventually just leave, and Parler texts you and says, hey, I got the movie too. Like, let me fucking take in information. Stop telling me what you think is best for me to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's a very dangerous thing to let the CEOs of multi-billion-dollar tech industries and tech companies be the arbiters of truth and what we can and can't see in our society. And that is an opinion that is very much shared by a lot of very dominant voices on the left.
Where are they?
They're hard to find because they're also relegated to outside of the what we would call the mainstream news media. They're and this is part of the thing, right? Is that a lot of these leftist voices are people who are seeing the slippery slope that regulating and deplatforming speech from the right. What the ramifications of that mean for their particular speech when it goes against the status quo and the I guess popular conceit and story, right? So there's a lot of people doing really great work on this. I can't recommend enough. Substack is a great place to find people, but you have to subscribe a lot there. But there's an excellent book that came out, I think just earlier this year or late last year, from a journalist who works for Rolling Stone too in his spare time, named Matt Taibbi. And he wrote an excellent book called Hate Inc., like Hate Incorporated. And it is all about the ways in which the news media have a vested interest in drawing a line in the sand and casting hateful rhetoric at one side or the other, and about the ways that real journalism is silenced often in favor of more of a general popular narrative.
And he's a leftist?
He is, absolutely, yeah. He's a somewhat problematic figure, I think, in certain circles of liberals. They really don't like him. But Glenn Greenwald is another person. He was one of the founders of The Intercept, one of the journalists who broke a lot of the Edward Snowden leaks.
Is he the one who got kicked out, fired recently, or left?
He left. He left The Intercept. And whole shitstorm around that too. But Glenn is someone whose voice is I think, so reviled amongst liberals because his rhetoric is often, without, I think, meaning to be, in defense of a lot of right-wing ideology. I think that what's unfortunate is that, there's this false binary in our media sphere. That is, you are either on the right or the left. And even those things are already sort of, carefully placed in this very centrist I hate the term Overton window, but it is sort of that, right? If you really want to get into the details of it, there's the classic work Manufacturing Consent by Edward Herman and Noam Chomsky that deals a lot with this, that journalism and the media in general act sort of as a propaganda wing of the state. Not so much in the fact that they're feeding us lies, but sometimes they are, but in the sense that they sort of preordain and select a very centrist, objective idea of what reality is, and often, sort of winnow down those far left and far right ideologies and thoughts.
And I think so. When a heckler would attack Nick DiPaolo, or when that happens, Nick DiPaolo is the type of comedian who will go right for, fuck yeah, right, just like, like an attack dog. Colin Quinn, Patrice O'Neill were more the people who will get into the psychology. And I'm more that approach. I don't think, and I've talked about this on my show, I don't think, you conservatives who are listening, who think shallowly about Colin Kaepernick as an example, who will say things like, oh, he just hates America, or he's just stupid. No. Get into the psychology of it. Because if you don't understand, if you don't strip away, if you don't expose them, they're going to feel unhurt. It's just going to bounce right off of them. They never have to stop and think about why they do what they do. If you just say, if you just come at well, you're being hypocritical. Of course they're being hypocritical. They're not going to budge on that. If you attack them in the way of what and help, because I try to understand why a douchebag would do the douchebaggery that he does, or she does, or they do, that helps, kind of grease the wheel for the change itself, I believe. You know what I mean? So why say Jack Dorsey, and maybe you're not, I don't think we've ever had deeper conversations when it comes to the psychology behind it, but why do you think of Mark Zuckerberg? Mark Zuckerberg is a more tangible example for me. Why do you feel he does what he does?
Gosh, okay, let's psychoanalyze a little bit here. No,
I know part of it is that he does get pressure from the left as well. He does get pressure from liberals they're not doing enough to stop free speech.
Yeah, well, and absolutely. I mean, the conversation is always about, like what's protected and what needs to be deplatformed and taken away. And I think that, there's a lot of people who would make the argument that you shouldn't, deplatform or ban any of it, so long as it falls under that sort of motto of free speech, right? There are limits even to that, right? In terms of, the classic, SCOTUS example of yelling fire in a crowded amphitheater. Like, you cannot do those kind of things, nor can you,
violence.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And those things are laid out very explicitly in a lot of these terms of use, right? Like, if I tweet right now, like, I'm going to kill Jack Dorsey, I will not have my account within 24 hours. You know what I mean? It's when we get into the other stuff that it starts to become confusing. And one of the big things there is just sort of the contradictions, right? The hypocrisy of all of it that I mentioned earlier when it comes to, regulating and sort of legislating thought and speech. I will take a recent example of the Hunter Biden situation, right? That there was, a post that had been relatively verified. I mean, the New York Post is kind of a rag. I wouldn't trust everything they say just on their printing of it alone.
But they do have lawyers. They're not allowed to print libel necessarily. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
there are, legal ramifications that they will meet if what they print is libelous, right? The thing about it is like, once those pictures are out, it's newsworthy. And to censor it and to block it from being shared just because it's on the grounds of hacked material is a really, really far-reaching, broad, and really problematic way to try to regulate that. Because under that same code of conduct and use, all of the Snowden leaks would also be things that could not receive a platform on the internet.
Nor did anyone get bounced or get deplatformed when they were trying to 4 weeks or prior when they were trying to get into Trump's taxes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the internet and the social media sites basically did the work of the Biden campaign for them in the lead up, frankly, and I'm okay with admitting that, like I'm generally left leaning and, do I think that, Hunter Biden having a history of, addiction and abuse is something that should be disqualifying for his father as a politician? Absolutely not. I think that we both agree on that. And I think it's pretty much a non-story, but the fact that a lot of these platforms so readily banned it and hid it from view is a problem. Mm-hmm. And something that we should not be championing. Honestly, if I have to go for it, there's always a profit motive involved. It's always where they can find, I think the next bang for their buck. let's talk about the fact that Jack Dorsey and Twitter have not fact checked or added any sort of note or addendum to a Trump tweet over the last 4 years until this election cycle. You know, when the writing was more or less on the wall that the guy was not going to be a second-term president. And so a lot of it feels like, you know,
I don't know about that. I don't know about that last part. So why would they ramp up? Why would they ramp up the desire to control what people perceive from his tweets until he's not going to win? I don't understand.
What I mean is that I think that it's, you know, how many Twitter users were drawn to the platform because they let Trump tweet whatever the fuck, you know, how many people follow him, how many people are on there to hate follow or to comment or to, you know, do some sort of meaningless, you know, resistance by tweeting, you know, discouraging words at him or whatever. And then very recently, we started fact checking things, you know, and part of that, you know, is wrapped up in this idea from these platforms that says, oh, we need to do better and we need to make sure that we're not so susceptible to, you know, to the election interference and the fraudulent claims that were happening during 2016. But that in itself seems motivated by a largely partisan idea, you know, and the truth of it is like tech is going to get a sweeter deal from a Democratic administration than a Republican one. That's not to say that Republicans would be harsh on them, or rather, you know, wouldn't be harsh on them. They would get a free ride either way. These guys have lots of money, and I think that in our current politics, money largely talks. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They can do what they want with relative impunity. And if they're doing this, you know, stuff that certainly favors a Democratic administration, I don't think it's without an idea that there is a sort of quid pro quo there in some capacity.
I mean, as Biden's been building his cabinet, it's amazing to see all the people who, oh, you worked for Google, you worked for Facebook, you worked for like creepy fuck.
Yeah, I mean. I have not regretted not casting my vote for Joe Biden. He's exactly who I assumed he would be, right. which is not much different than any of those other political actors, unfortunately.
I would venture to say part of the problem, and I know that it sometimes is me beating a dead horse, but if you're worried about me not beating a dead horse, why are you listening to the show? You know, I think part of the problem again goes to maybe not the left ideology, but the liberal ideology built around race. And they've used this poker chip so well. They've used this guilt so well, this white guilt, that now because it can transform into anything, because now camping is a white supremacist, you know, because you can camp and Black people can't, you know, that they find white supremacy anywhere. Now they can get their bureaucratic fingers into all of it, into every single aspect of life, and really clamp that down. So I think part of the problem, again, psychologically, with Mark Zuckerberg and with maybe not Bill Gates anymore, because I think that ship has sailed a long time ago, but Zuckerberg and Dorsey, is the fact that I'm new money. And new money, what happens is you start to feel guilt. You start to feel a responsibility. You're like, okay, I have all this money. I've bought literally every single fucking thing that I can buy. What do I do now? And I have all these people knocking at my door who say, we need to use this money for good. Check out this video from a UN speech of this Black girl who says, oh, I saw a bad thing on the internet. You know, all this, everybody's knocking at your door because you have this money equals power. And now you feel like, oh, I do have responsibility. What should I do now? I should clamp down on these problematic people. I should help guide the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's some of that, to be sure, but I think a lot of it is, again, I think it's a lot of it is very performative and sort of doing the bare minimum when it comes to that kind of thing. I think it's a lot of gesturing towards a lot of political pressures of the moment and not actual ideas of how to preserve free speech and also regulate it to the point of making sure to, you know, that we maintain people's safety on platforms. I don't know. I honestly don't know what the answer is, but it's interesting. I'm glad that you bring up this idea of identity politics and white guilt and stuff, because I think that there's a lot of things to pick at there when it comes to left ideology and stuff.
Right. I think it's one of the most venomous things. And let's transition this. Part of the reason why it's a venomous thing is not because they wouldn't make it something else, because they would. Just like I've talked about on the show before, but like they've gone after Black people too. Like they don't like Black conservatives either. Color is no longer as big a poker chip, and they're losing that cultural war. So they're just transitioning it to other stuff. As a, not Marxist, but as somebody, who likes more socialist policies, isn't where do you reconcile it in yourself when it comes to cultural socialism, cultural Marxism, cultural communism, whatever it is, the cultural side of it, and how it will trample anything and everything in its wake?
Lots of good stuff there. So I want to kind of just also, briefly make the definitive statement here that cultural Marxism is a myth developed by the right. Okay. It's get the fuck. Here we go. So,
what the hell?
Okay, ready? Here we go.
All right.
Well, okay. Because I'm always interested in people's perception and idea of what Marxism actually is, right? So, there are, yes, fundamental ideas about how society functions within communism, within socialism, within like Marxist ideology. But the thing that Marxism is not is a lot of the things that I think more right-leaning thinkers have painted as this idea of cultural Marxism, which is a thing that dates all the way back to really like, the Third Reich. This idea of painting certain minority groups as cultural Marxists who are trying to dissolve certain.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Clarify what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
What I mean is the witch huntery and the selling out of, right, the cancel culture-ness that was manifesting itself when people were getting thrown into gulags, just like it is now, obviously on a much different level for now. The night is young, but that's what I mean by cultural Marxism, meaning the goalpost always changes. And once they have hold up, meaning I don't know how, even if you like the financial benefits of socialism or socialist policies, how once that the animus that has moved things towards your policies, towards leftist policies, has been on the backs of racist, homophobic, blah blah blah, of cancel culture-ness. How do you divert that beast now? It's too late, isn't it?
No, I don't think so. So I would actually, say that for people who consider themselves conservatives, who find identity politics and the culture of the oppression Olympics, fundamentally challenging or repellent, I think that all I would say is you would find a profound number of allies on the left. The identity politics are a thing that are really corrosive to the idea of fundamental institutional change within a leftist ideology, I think, and because identity politics too also is a manifestation of neoliberalism. It's a manifestation of capitalism, right? It's a purely cultural ideology that actually, at best obfuscates and at worst completely erases class consciousness. Not every Black person's experience is identical. Blackness is absolutely a thing that is experienced in specific ways by probably all Black people, but culturally and especially economically, sociopolitically, the experience changes, right? And so intersectionality of whatever identifiers you may embody, this idea of like standpoint epistemology or essentialism, like any of those sort of like essential factors of your identity, cut off from an intersection with class understanding is not going to be, is always going to have contradictions, right? So I would tell you, and I would argue that, you know, a lot of the policies that we're looking for and, you know, advocating for on the left, yes, absolutely do have a level of wealth redistribution and racial and economic justice in mind. But it is not on the front of saying, you know, that we're going to erase the blackface episodes of 30 Rock, or you know, that there has to be an all ladies Ghostbusters. Like, those things are not wins. Those are purely symbolic things, and they aren't generative, right? That's the biggest issue.
30, God damn it. 30 Rock is the best show that was made.
It's such a good show.
The fact that white ass Tina Fey, and I love Tina Fey to the day I die. I don't care if she ever hates on me for my politics. Because I will be that fucking famous, by the way, everybody. I don't give a shit. 30 Rock is the best show ever. And the fact that those episodes are gone, those were beautiful, beautiful episodes with Black people who were just fucking fine with it, all in the crew and the stage. And it, you know what I mean? Like, it's such a fucking tragedy that those shows were erased.
Well, and again, there's a certain level of contradiction and hypocrisy there as well. You know, we've been rewatching it in my household lately too, and on an episode from like the second season that we're in right now, multiple characters refer to a transsexual person as shim, and you know, an incredibly offensive thing by a 2020 standard as it pertains to, you know, identity politics. And you know,
Michael Scott literally holds his eyes like this and goes, "I'm peeing," and yet that's fine to keep on The Office, but we have to take away the fucking Shavate Pete episode. Come on,
right? But you know, that's the argument that I think is central to why essentialism and why identity politics fail, right? Is because there's nothing generative about that ideology. It is all subtractive. It is all about taking things away and removing things from the culture to sanitize, and not about actually advancing materially anybody within those marginalized groups. It's about making them feel good, maybe, you know, whoever's complaining about it. Other people don't seem to care. But what it doesn't do is change their material condition in any way.
So you're saying the way you reconcile it mentally, maybe you don't need to reconcile it, but you're saying that it's two different beasts. One of them is making believe that it's the other.
Yeah, you know, I think that there are plenty of people who, on the left, we like to call them woke scolds. I don't know if you guys have adopted that term, but you know, there are plenty of people of you know, progressive liberal ideologies that are very steeped in you know, the identity politics and you know, I keep using this word essentialism. Do you understand what I mean when I say that? Essentialism is effectively being the inherent traits of a person's identity, things that are inescapable from their existence, like their skin color, like their you know, ethnic background, or things like that.
Their pee-pee or their hoo-ha.
Exactly, all of those things, or you know, their you know, or their gender identity, or any of those things, right? But you know, there is a place for acknowledging the ways in which our society as a whole has often systemically advanced predominantly white wealthy people. I think that that's a thing that we you know, we can argue that white wealthy people have had it a lot better than most other people through pretty much all of the history of our country.
Wealthy is the thing I'll get on board with, but I also don't think that what I used to think, which is what a lot of liberals maybe, and maybe leftists too, believe, is that wealthy is a privilege and not something that you earned.
I mean, I guess it depends, right? There's plenty of examples of generational wealth. There's plenty of people who have made their wealth as like the first, you know, person to do so in their family and lineage of any kind.
But even those who didn't, attaching the guilt that comes with calling that's a privilege, by attaching guilt to that, I think it's not correct either.
I don't think that it's about feeling guilty. Again, that's part of what essentialism and identity politics teaches, that you can find ideological and justice in simply feeling bad and asking for constant, reconciliation. And that's not what leftism is about, right?
Okay. All
So,
right.
so here's the distinction, right? Is like, one of them is, continuing to see the priest and saying your Hail Marys and feeling bad and going about your way until you have to come back again. And one of those things is simply saying, great, you have succeeded under our economic model in a way that benefits you profoundly more than a lot of people in our society. So the thing that we're going to do is ask that because you've achieved more, you simply contribute more societally, at least as it pertains to finances, right? And I'm not talking about just taxes. I'm talking about, I'm talking about taxes a lot too, right? Wealth accumulation is the thing that we're looking for. And so it's the thing that's left out of a lot of the identity politics arguments, right? Which is this idea of a redistributive wealth model in politics.
Touche. So that makes sense. I also think what's missing from a lot of the conversation is how to teach. I'm going to say it real ham-handed, so everybody close your ears. To teach Black motherfuckers who do get wealth not to spend it on fucking rims. How to. There's not really enough talk, I believe. It's not just, okay, I'm going to give this mouse a cookie. You should try to teach how to, you know what I mean? Like how to keep a job, how to have pride in your job, how to move up in the ranks, how to have desire for a work ethic, how to save, how to invest, there's not a lot of that. It's more just like a weird Hail Mary type of symbolic gesture of give these Black people money.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the thing about leftist politics too. I think people kind of see leftists, even in liberal circles, as people who carry this sort of have this purity test. Have these like kind of like pH strips that they're always dipping into things and saying like not good enough. We're not gonna ascribe to this particular thing, or we're not going to support this particular candidate's philosophies. Part of that is exactly what you're saying. I want to make a distinction, though, that I don't think that there's a necessity to homogenize culture in a way that tells people that, buying rims or, the Alizé or whatever is a bad joking, thing. Obviously. I know. But there's an important distinction there to be made regardless, which sure. is because I think a lot of people do make that argument fundamentally that the reason that Black people don't advance societally and economically is because they don't know how to take care of their money. Maybe. But a part of that too is about, a social safety net and an economically distributive system that actually stimulates aspects of people's lives and gives them opportunity to do so.
Right. And I'm not even saying that that's what the 100% the problem is, because I appreciate that you're bringing that up. Mm-hmm. I mean, sorry, everybody, but here it is. As Patrice used to fucking say, it's sure Black guys will spend it on clothes, on a pair of shoes and only wear the pair of shoes once. White rich guys will buy a life-size figurine of Superman. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's both. It's like, what the fuck are you doing, right? But I think it's more the bone structure culture. I don't want to get too hippie into it, but when you have when I have the mentality of lack, when I have the mentality of what's the word I'm looking for? Of not depreciation. When I have the mentality of not enoughness, I will, as soon as I get whatever I think will make me whole, it will be an unending, it's an unending pit to try to fill up. So I think mentally trying to help Black people or at least poor Black people come at the idea of getting wealth, getting resources, getting whatever, and being responsible with it is part of the mechanism as well. All I'm saying is the idea that fucking lottery winners are perfect examples of that. Lottery winners go often very broke very quickly, lots of suicide, lots of whatever. Mm-hmm. And instead of culturally teaching them that it's more than just money.
Yeah, absolutely. And nothing that I'm saying here is about just kind of writing people a check. When I was talking before about the purity test thing, it's what I was trying to get at is the fact that for a lot of leftists, these things and these fundamental ideas of how to legislate and how to economically regulate things in society are intrinsically linked to everything else, right? There's a conversation right now happening about student debt forgiveness with Joe Biden, right? It started at $50,000, and Joe Biden, being the spineless, feckless prick that he is negotiating with himself and is like, oh, maybe 10,000 is better. But, there's a conversation in there that's like, people saying, well, what about the people who have already paid off college? What about those people? And another thing that's like, well, how does student debt forgiveness keep people from going into debt again if we're not making colleges free? And the thing that we tell them is, yes, you're absolutely right. The idea here is to legislate in a way that forgives student loans, that forgives medical debt, that finances public universities for free, tuition free, that socializes medicine. All of these things are even kind of under a blanket, if we want to get like really technical with it, under an idea of like climate justice as well. As we start moving away from, really carbon heavy things in our society, divesting from fossil fuel.
You do me a favor though and take justice out of that. I know it's part of the colloquial, but just is disgusting.
Okay.
Don't it's a fucking dumb, useless word that throws in black people are black. Just call it climate, maybe climate thoughts or something, climate change.
Okay. How about climate restabilization? We'll call it, because the truth of it is that part of what we have to do is acknowledge the way in which we've like really mistreated the planet. And that if we continue to do so the way we are, things are going to get pretty ugly in terms of, colossal natural disasters and forest fires and what have you. So we'll call it climate restabilization. But as we divest away from, the $100 billion that are in fossil fuels, if we, limit our military intervention and get out of, 7 countries that we have like active military personnel in, not to mention all the other 50, 60 military bases that we have manned and stationed across the globe.
So you're almost clarifying that a leftist, a true, genuine ass motherfucking leftist, should not be a globalist.
No, absolutely. Yeah. There's globalism has been a thing that has been really, really anemic when it comes to supporting the working class. Deregulated capitalism, like open free markets and globalization, as like NAFTA is one of the worst pieces of legislation for the working class in the history of the country. And the TPP is the same way. One of the things that I think is actually, a fundamental good of the Trump administration is that the TPP is literally not active. But I think that a Biden administration might make it so very quickly. And it's basically just NAFTA 2.0. All of these things give a lot more power to the wealthy and to corporations and to CEOs to divest from American industry and go to places that are much cheaper and, exploit labor in other places. None of these things are good for people on the home front here in America, making an honest living, having worker protections, having collective bargaining power, and being able to live comfortably. So yes, so there's a lot of anti-imperialist, anti-globalist thinking on the left that is sort of making, in a parlance you might be familiar with, making America just another bozo on the bus. A great bozo on the bus, but one that's self-sufficient and one that takes care of its people first, instead of focusing on the ultra wealthy and the elites in our society and giving them free reign to do whatever they want and exploit other people around the globe.
Right. Now, when it comes to some of the things or many of the things in the light of, well, in the light of other countries not changing a fucking thing, how does one, so true independence from a globalist idea then, or from globalist ideology, would necessitate that a leftist might be not super into defense, but would have true ass defenses, right?
You mean in terms of like stimulating military spending? I would say that leftists are
not spending, but having a strong, bolstered, not to the point of world police, but hey, we've got our own thing going, suck my dick, get away from me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, kind of. Which I guess is a fine, kind of idea in the abstract, but I would say that a lot of the military uh, actions that we've taken over the course of the last 100 years have been either provoked by Western society or have been in response to attacks on Western society because of a lot of the things that we had done in the past militarily.
Sure.
So,
But, but in a
I
leftist's, not in a liberal, but in a leftist's dream,
mm-hmm.
what would defense look like?
I think that in a leftist dream, it would be collective nuclear deproliferation.
Deproliferation.
Yeah, basically, right now we are pointing the fingers at economically China and militarily like maybe Russia. There's a lot of that going on, but Iran is another big one, right? Iran and probably North Korea as well. And a big issue with both of those countries right now is their access to nuclear arms. Well, Iran is mobilizing and gathering, what is it, uranium, plutonium, whatever it is. They're making nukes because they are under constant siege and threat of military involvement from Israel, who are one of our partners financially, militarily, what have you. We invest a lot of money into Israel, and their interests economically and in terms of their capacity to impose their will on most of the Middle East is something that we very much value in our military strategy. So I think in a perfect world, and I smarter people than I have probably thought of and don't have any idea of how to do this, but like standing down and actually stopping, pointing those missiles at Iran is probably a really good way for them to not continue to build nuclear arms. Now, I'm just not saying that that's absolutely the case, but in the current situation, like what other recourse have we given them? We're literally pointing a gun at them and calling them a threat because they are assembling a gun in front of us. So, I think that there is, maybe a little bit pie in the sky when it comes to military stuff on the left, but one of the biggest things that we are opposed to is imperialist efforts and in terms of destabilizing other places in the world, which the U.S. has had a hand in pretty much everywhere. So,
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in my ultimate dream, I would be more libertarian than anything when it comes to that type of stuff. At the same time, having every country ever have nuclears, having nuclear access is a little fucked up too. not because here's why. I think, I could be wrong, but I don't think everyone's culturally coming to the table at the same way. It's like pushing your nephew who's only who maybe, your nephew up to the table and giving him a giant knife. Everybody's got a gun, but some of them are 27 and some of them are 3. Mm-hmm. Might not be a great fucking idea if Iran is still stoning women to death because they cheated on their husband. You know what I mean? Let them, I know that's fucked up, maybe of an idea. I'm not calling them savages, but shit. You know what I mean? Yeah. Who's going to be a little more? Who's going to be less hot-headed than the ones who are run by a caliphate of of people who believe that there is the only one true God, and we can throw gays off of roofs. You know what I mean? It just creepy.
Sure. I mean, I think there's a sound argument to be made, though, that we also live in a relatively monotheistic and authoritarian culture that also does not particularly treat, people outside of certain Judeo-Christian parameters particularly well, or haven't historically. And there's a lot of people in our regulatory bodies who would like to do things that make it much harder for some of those people to act in certain ways or to have certain religious freedoms.
Specifically in what because I'd like to press you on this. 25
Yeah.
years ago, I think you would be right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't think that's the case. I'd like to know.
No, and I don't think that it's the case as much anymore. I don't think that we have quite as strong an evangelical bent to our Republican majority. I think that there's certainly people like a Mike Pence who are driven very much by their sort of fundamental religious beliefs. I think that in Amy Coney Barrett certainly has some certain religious beliefs that persuade her that aren't necessarily constitutional. But no, you're totally right. Like the actual in terms of the grasp that the evangelicals have on the right wing, it's loosened and weakened over time.
I would say even among right and left, if you wanted to call it one thing or another, for better or worse, because I do like capitalism, but for better or worse, I would say that our God here is us. For better or worse, I would say that our God here is kind of capitalism and our Western way of life, which I think is pretty fucking great. And I know that leftists might be like, hey, but what about, and hey, that's a different thing. I don't think that our God, if you wanted to call it our God, who treat the outsider bad, is not going to be, hey, fuck Jews, or hey, fuck gays, or hey, fuck, not anymore. Now it's, hey, fuck people who want to throw gays off of rooftops and kill other people for not believing in their God.
That's fair. Interesting that you say that, in terms of, our God being ourselves and capitalism. Because I was thinking about that myself, that absolutely is a driving force of our society. But if that's also the case, then you can't, I think, fault people in really any ethnic background for focusing almost exclusively on indicators of wealth once they acquire it, whether those are Black people, white people, what have you, like you said, like the rims versus the Superman statue, our society and capitalism intrinsically has this sort of like conceit of endlessness to it. Right. And part of, I think, what the leftist ideology is about is recognizing limits, and recognizing when enough is enough, and also to recognize when other people in our society don't have enough, and not to give them more, not to put, elevate them to a platform above you, not to, be this sort of, flagellate who says like, please forgive me for all of my sins. But, the safety net that undergirds our society has been slowly chipped away at over the course of generations. And most of what leftists are trying to do is just restore that so that, people's right to a comfortable life remains intact.
I would say that those two things, one of them being helping people who are less fortunate. What was the other thing? The other thing there, the other topic, we just transitioned away from it.
Was it the military?
No.
Was it the God stuff?
Maybe. Oh, focus on money not being enough. The not being enough problem, which is a universal human problem, and the helping others who are less fortunate or who need some help. I would venture to say that when used correctly, big caveat, when used correctly, that's what kind of churches and religion were fucking for.
Oh, absolutely.
When used correctly, you had a community who around you of people who would help you remember, hey, you trying to stuff food, trying to stuff money into that fucking gaping hole, the not enough hole is not the way to go about life, number one. And number two, hey, look at that, be the good Samaritan. That when used correctly, that's what that's for. And us breaking that down, there's going to be consequences to that. And us not having a God, of course, we're going to switch over to us not having a glue between us, a cultural, spiritual, whatever you want to call it, glue between us, is what makes people focus more on us being the God, on capitalism being the God, on money being the God.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's, I don't necessarily know that we need, a particular, guiding religion or understanding collectively like that to do that. But I do think that people work better in society, fundamentally operates better when people have a shared goal or vision of something, and I think it's something that's sincerely lacking. It's a big thing that if we get, back into climate restabilization, it's a big thing that's talked about is when it comes to climate policy and doing the things that are fundamental to restructuring our economy and our society to make sure that people are taken care of, and also that we are taking care of our house and our place around us, that common shared collective goal is something that most people can buy into, especially when they're getting something out of it too, which is a good job and the amenities of a developed society, like healthcare and childcare and education and all of those things. So
sure. I also, and 10 more minutes, cool?
Absolutely.
Okay. I also would like to, I would love to talk about because on that same topic, it would be good, and I'm not a globalist, but it would be good for us all to have one set of agreed upon rules when it comes to some things. I love libertarian out the fuck. Let me say what the fuck I want to do. Let me do what I want to do. Leave me alone. Take as little money as possible. I know you disagree, whatever. But I want, libertarian more than anything. But it is attractive, the idea of, hey, country way the fuck over there, filled with people that I have no intellectual roots in, that I have no, right? Hey, country way over there, don't throw people off of a roof because they suck dick. That is a very attractive idea. So wouldn't it be great if we could I believe that there's not really a way in this current structure anyway, for us to get there without that being manipulated, without bureaucracy and bullshit changing that, without globalism really. I mean, that's the whole problem. Why people are so anti-globalist is because as soon as you hand over, hey, everything all in this one key, that key now gets in the wrong fucking hands, and everybody has the wrong hands. That's where I'm coming from, right?
Yeah.
But it is attractive to have that idea of, hey, don't throw gays off roofs.
I think that that's a great idea, not throwing gays off of roofs. And so, I think that there's a distinction to be made, when using the term globalization, or globalism in general, between the idea of globalization as it pertains to like free and open markets and trade, and globalization as it pertains to, the developed world being thought leaders and legislative leaders to help along developing nations. You know what I mean? Like, I think that there is.
But even on that level, I had Black and White Issue on my show a couple of episodes ago, and they were talking about how Bill Gates was going into Africa and giving millions and millions and millions, all these companies, millions of dollars into reproductive health, even though a lot of these countries in Africa, abortion is illegal. So that money, of course, somebody is going to go, oh, I'm an abortion doctor. Give me money, please. Money, please. They get that money, and then she brought up an article about how this one abortion clinic, because it was illegal, had non-doctors working there, and there were like bodies of babies behind the fucking place. Culturally, it also gets sticky because then Bill Gates knows what's best for Black people.
Yeah, well, I don't think that, the idea of elite philanthropy and sort of like breadcrumb philanthropy as it pertains to a lot of the people in our body politic who are adjacent to actual legislative and regulating bodies, like wealthy people, they don't have a place in doing that kind of thing. Bill Gates could, I think we even talked about this maybe last time I was on the show, Bill Gates could do a lot more good if we just taxed Microsoft effectively and got rid of some offshore tax havens and trillions of dollars worth of wealth that he and other elites are squirreling away in islands where there's no financial regulation. I think that taxing those things effectively and giving those things to a governing body is a lot more effective than Bill Gates deciding individually what's right and how to use his money and say, like, I'm going to go and give this money for abortions when abortion is illegal and people are going to get murdered for doing it. That to me is not what I'm talking about. We have a model of the United Nations, and in terms of like peacekeeping and a relative sort of like idea of international diplomacy, right? And so when I say globalizing in the realm of creating a confluent idea across developed nations of how they're going to economically approach climate restabilization and access to medicine and access to healthcare and education and all that kind of stuff. I think that they can be leaders in that sense, and and not leave it to individual actors like a Bill Gates or an Elon Musk to decide, independent of a government and independent of regulation. These little ideas, these little token ideas of what to do and how to spend money.
Right. I mean, because the reality is, I mean, when you look at Elon Musk, I'm grateful for somebody like him because, yeah, he's pretty cool and he does, Tesla is fucking great. You know what I mean? Like I was in a Tesla, our mutual friend, I won't mention his name, but I was in his Tesla a few years ago. He's like, feel this. I mean, I'm like, this is an electric car. I've driven a Prius before. We were on Highway 5. It took me 20 minutes to get from 90 miles an hour to like 95 miles an hour. And he's like, watch this. We like went up and it was fucking bestial, this Tesla. So that's cool. But I'm grateful for Elon in a different way because he's a little more fucking nuts. And I appreciate that because he's a little more fucking nuts, that shows that people with money is just because Bill Gates doesn't tweet like Kanye doesn't mean he's a trustworthy emotionally, intellectually.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't think that we should be giving him, the keys or letting him get behind the wheel of our society in any capacity.
Or Michelle Obama. Let's just
put agreed.
that out there too.
Again, all of those things are operating sort of anti-democratically and outside of the purview of a government, which is another thing, which is just, constantly trying to make that government more representational. Right. Big proponent of getting rid of like the electoral college, if we bring it back full circle to the election stuff too, and making everybody's vote count as a vote rather than as a point on a map. But that's
now, what were the benefits to the electoral college?
What would the benefits be of abolishing the electoral college?
What were the benefits of setting it up?
Your guess is as good as mine. I have no idea. It's a I think globally unique system. And
it makes sense 200 years ago.
Yes, I mean there were ideas there. I think that were meant to ensure that the democracy and that the vote was more representative than it otherwise would be, given people's sort of approximation on a map. I think that now in our current world, it's doing the exact opposite of those things, which is giving a lot of leeway and sway to 6 or 7 states on the map, as opposed to giving elected officials the win if they have a popular vote. We've seen multiple times in our lifetimes when people who receive more votes actually lose elections. So
right, and I get that. I do get that. But I also, and I'm not as abreast. I like abreast. I'm not as in-depth researched at it, but I don't like the idea on a federal level, when it comes to even the president, of someone in San Francisco, of let's make it really on a small molecular level, on 20 people in San Francisco deciding what happens in North Dakota. They are worlds apart in many ways, not just economically, culturally, racially, whatever it is, that 20 people in San Francisco get to decide, get to lead someone in North Dakota around by the fucking nose, right? Now, I get it. The majority, I agree with you, the majority of what gets real change is on a county basis, on a district basis, on a, on the fact that you could go into San Francisco and a bag is 25 cents and you could go into Redwood City and a bag is 10 cents or whatever. I get that. But president, you know what I mean? Like, it just kind of, if the president is going to make as much a difference in North Dakota as San Francisco, having San Francisco, LA, New York decide what happens for everywhere in the country, especially when those 3 places are all inner city places, and inner city people are very different 20 minutes down the road in any direction.
Yeah, I agree. But, I think that right now we have the exact opposite of that, which is that,
What way?
Well, that a lot of the swing states are the ones who are are calling elections for us, right? You know, right now, you know, you have a situation like you said, like if we abolish the electoral college, all of those major hubs of populations in big cities, whether it's, you know, Detroit or Atlanta or Chicago, San Francisco, New York, et cetera, making up a large portion of the electorate. I think that part of that is also making it easier for people in less urban areas to vote as well, you know, like more rural areas, and also making, you know, people in you know, also more urban areas who you know, face a lot of voter disenfranchisement, giving them easier access to it.
So you're not saying let's go to the popular vote. You're saying whatever this system of trying to get representation for the little guy is, it's having the opposite effect, where only the little guy has the bigger sway. Because let's be real, fucking Ohio, you're a little guy. Let's be real.
Well, and that's my point, right? Is right now, you know, pretty much every election is decided by you know, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida, and bizarrely, you know, Georgia and Nevada this year. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what the perfect system is. I don't. Maybe, you know, a sort of standard, popular vote, like, you know, representational democracy where everyone's vote counts for the same, and whoever gets more of their votes is elected. Maybe that is the way to go. I don't know, but I do know that the way that we do it presently doesn't seem to be working very often. It's leading to you know, people who are not getting the most votes often being the people who win the elections. But that's a whole long conversation, and one that I probably don't have, you know, the thorough notes or research on either to speak with any level of real authority.
Right, I get that. Yeah, I think I would like it if we did abolish electoral college, if the main drum of that wasn't being drummed by people like creepy ass AOC. You know what I mean? I would love it if people who were real genuine leftists weren't being conflated with liberals, current day liberals especially, and then having the gas in the tank of where you guys are trying to go, have it be on the backs of Black people, disenfranchised, you know, trans people like that. It wasn't on the backs of identity politics.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that there is a little bit, maybe too much of that from the current progressive wing of the Democratic Party for sure. But I think you would be surprised at how adversarial a lot of those people are being towards an incoming Biden administration right now, specifically in their own sort of channels and online. AOC has been hyper vocal. Of course, Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar right there with her, and a lot of the incoming progressives who I'm really excited for, like Jamal Bowman in New York, and Cori Bush out of Missouri as well, are people who I think are gonna you know, come in with the gloves on when it comes to the old way of doing things in the status quo. And for them, it's not about you know, who has it the worst. I think for a lot of those people, the message is, how do we make sure that everyone has it good, and that's not exclusionary, right? You know, I think that, you know, one of the things with identity politics, and I'm going to steal a phrase from someone that I listened to recently, that politics has kind of become this thing that is no longer about can anything good happen to me? It's about deciding who the people are that the bad stuff happens to the most. And neither of those philosophies on either side of the ticket are particularly generative, you know. And part of the leftist, you know, philosophy is restructuring a social safety net, and really elevating and really reinvigorating a working class of Americans, you know, most Americans. And that's not just Black people. That's not just Latinos. That's not just Asians. That's also white working class people as well. You know, a real leftist coalition is one that's built up of all of those people. You know, white people are, you know, whether we want to admit it or not, a majority of the country still, you know, they absolutely are. And in a coalition that is
calling them all racists,
right? And by its nature, exclusionary is not going to you know, not going to build anything that is going to achieve any sort of success at the ballot box.
Right, and I'll just say, because we do have to stop, but like
Let's wrap.
I do feel like you've given those guys the keys, and it may have benefited leftists fiscally or whatever, but it's a little creepy. I don't think there's going to be a way you can get the white guilt, evil white patriarchy, they them pronouns thing out of the teeth
Mm-hmm.
of people like AOC and Rashida Tlaib.
Well, I'll say one thing really quickly, I guess, before we wrap up, just on that note there, which is sort of the same thing that I said at the beginning of the hour as well, which is if you're a conservative person seeing that rhetoric, if you're a conservative person listening to me talk right now, that dissonance that you're feeling, that weirdness around this really subtractive, really hostile form of politics that asks you to feel guilty or feel bad or bend the knee in any way, like that dissonance is real. That is absolutely there, and what you're feeling is coming from a hyper vocal part of a liberal sphere that doesn't want anything fundamentally to change. They just want to feel better while everything gets worse. And so, the leftist philosophy and the leftist ideology is also, running parallel in some ways, but running counter to it as well. It's a place that is, like I said, looking to build a broad coalition of people, looking to benefit everybody, and trying to counteract a lot of that stuff that takes away liberty and democracy in our society, and in whatever form that is, whether it's the right and access to a ballot, or whether it is you being allowed to make a joke that you want to on Twitter. All of those things are things that we defend on the left. So that's all I'll say about it. And I always really appreciate being on the show, Pete, talking with you about it. I come on because like I maybe I said before, I think that we have a lot of things in common. And I think that we have a mutual enemy in the status quo, because it's not getting us anywhere, in that sort of center, whether it's a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left. And I don't know. I think that there's a way forward for both of us cohesively with a certain ideology in mind. So
right on. Where can people find you?
Yeah, again, I'm the host of Hit Factory, a podcast about the films of the 1990s. We are on streaming services as well as Patreon, patreon.com/hitfactorypod. And I guess if you want to follow me for a lot of upsetting, offensive leftist takes, I can give my Twitter there as well. My Twitter handle is silly. It's a hot dog slushy. Ugh. Yeah. And it's a photo of me as a little kid.
Sexual reference?
It is not.
Like I've tasted that before.
But I'm there too if you want to follow along and maybe get a sense more of what my particular political ideology is and how it differs from the shitty liberals that you're used to seeing in those spheres. So
awesome. What's the next episode? What movie are you doing?
Yeah, well, we just did a Patreon exclusive one on Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Nice. Which was a lot of fun. Really good conversation there about post-Cold War America and all the anxieties that go along with that. And we're doing Ang Lee's The Ice Storm, which is a film set in the 1970s around the Watergate hearings over a Thanksgiving weekend. So it's coming right in time for our own Thanksgiving and plenty of political scandals to be observed on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah. Great. Make sure you subscribe, everybody. Make sure you're listening. What the fuck do I normally say? Oh, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you rate, review, share it with your less offendable friends. Find me on Instagram at Peter_Feliciano. You can find me on TikTok at Conservatish Podcast. You can find me on Patreon if you'd like, but I won't tell you where. And you can find me on Twitter and all that bullshit too. Thank you so much, Aaron. I always love our conversations, and I appreciate your openness. And I'll leave you with a final thought. Don't worry too much about your haircut. I'm sure it's fine. Okay.
But I look good in a hat too.
You do. But I also feel like it cuts you off perfectly, where if you had just a little less sleeve, you would be like the perfect 90s gym rat type of you know what I mean? White man can't jump type of
I have to reconstruct my aesthetic once every like 4 or 5 months. So that might be my next look, or maybe I'll just go full Walter White and shave it all off.
And that would be an interesting thing that guys should talk about. White Men Can't Jump. That's going to be your next movie.
Okay. Wait, maybe you can come on and talk about it with us.
Yeah. Or I don't know, whatever. I was going to make some sort of reference joke, bald motherfucker from the 90s, but I'm tired. Okay. It's 10 o'clock. Thank you again, Aaron. Really appreciate it, man.
Hey, thanks, Pete.
Bye, everybody.